Now that we have our list with the posts, we should let the users participate in the discussions by creating new posts. To begin with, we would need a form to write some text. Where should we put this form in our code? Well, we could place it within the post list component. But I prefer to have the code that interacts with the global state in the parent component, which in this case is a thread show. In Vue.js, we use the word state to describe all the data around our application. Each component has its own private state that it is actually its data. In our case, the data.json file is the global state, since it is being shared among all components. So I will add a form right after the post list here. In the form, we will need the text area and the submit button. I will paste some HTML markup for that here to make it look nicer. You can just keep the form with the two required elements. I will also put this code in the description of the lesson so you can copy it if you want to. To make the form work, we can bind the text area's value to a data property and invoke a method when the form is submitted. So let's add a new data property that I will call newPostText. Now I will bind it to the value of the text area. This way, the text area will have the value of newPostText, but the newPostText data will never update. What we want to do here is to update newPostText every time the user types something in the text area. The first thing that comes in mind is to listen to the input event and store the value to the newPostText data property. Whenever we need to listen to a native or custom event, we use the von directive. Von needs the name of the event to listen to. In this case, we want to listen to the input event. Next, von accepts an expression that can be a method or an inline statement. Since what we want to do here is quite simple, I will use an inline statement, where I will set newPostText to event target value. I will switch von with its shorthand, which is the @ symbol. Now, if newPostText changes, the text area's value will update. But this time, if text area's value changes, newPostText will change as well. This is what we call two-way data binding. Let's check it out in the browser. I will find the thread show component in the components tree in Vue DevTools. Now, I will type something in the text area to see that the value of newPostText data property updates. Great! Now, to show you the two-way data binding, I will change newPostText to something else in the DevTools. So I will make this hello there. Notice that once I hit save, we immediately see the value of the text area update as well. Perfect. To make our lives easier, Vue provides the vModel directive that is syntactic sugar for vbind value something on input update something. So the vModel directive creates a two-way binding between the input element and the data property that is bound to. So we don't need this anymore. Okay, let's create a method that will store the post. I will call it addPost. Within addPost, we have to create a post object and then push it to the posts array of the data.json file. To do that, first let's check how a post is structured. Each post has a published @ property, a thread ID, a text, and a user ID. Remember that the thread ID and the user ID properties are foreign keys that connect the post with the related resources. So, our post object should contain the text, which is the value of the text area, so this .newPostText. A published @ attribute, which is the current time. Published at should be a timestamp in seconds since January 1st, 1970. To get the current timestamp, we can use date.now, but this returns the timestamp in milliseconds. In order to convert it in seconds, we can divide it by 1000 and then round the result using math.floor, which returns the largest integer that is less or equal to the given number. Next, the post needs a thread ID, which is the ID of the thread that owns the post. Since we are in the page_thread_show component, we can easily access the thread ID using this.id. And lastly, it needs the user ID, which is the ID of the active user. Since we haven't implemented authentication yet, we can use the ID of a random user for now. Let's pick one from the users object. Since we don't need to redeclare the post variable later on, we can use the const keyword here to declare it. Keep in mind that we can change the post's properties, like post text, but we cannot reassign a value to the post itself. Okay, I think it looks good. Now we have to append the new post to the posts object. We can use the posts object by mapping it to a data property or directly using sourceData.posts. The thing here is that the new post does not have an ID. Later on, we will use Firebase to generate IDs for all resources. For now, I will use a string along with a random number. In general, you should not be responsible for creating IDs manually, and even if you do, you should use a library instead of relying on math_random. With the ID in place, I can add the post to our post list. Before we test the form, we also need to add the post ID to the thread.posts property, because we use thread.posts to find the posts we display in the thread page. To do so, we can access the thread using this.thread and then push the new post ID to the posts object. To connect the addPost method to our form, we can listen to the form's submit event and then trigger the method. Thus, we will use von. In this case, we can write von_submit equals addPost. Let's check it out in the browser. Hello there. Submit and nothing happens. This is because the page reloads right after I hit the submit button. So we need to prevent the browser from reloading. Vue.js offers a .prevent event modifier, which is the same as using e.prevent defaults within our code. I will apply the prevent event modifier to our submit event listener and try again. When I hit submit, it still doesn't work. Let's see if the post is added to the posts array in our data. I see that we have 77 posts here, so let's try to add it again. I click submit a couple of times, but the array length doesn't seem to change. Let's see why this might be. So I notice that we have one post here, but if I navigate to the post list and back to thread show, our array has 98 entries, so it means that it adds a post every time I click the button. This means that our code works fine in adding the post, but our changes in the component and in the browser are not reactive. The reason that this is happening is because Vue.js doesn't get the change when we do it to the JSON file directly. But we do have a local data property called posts that maps to the source data prop. So if we use this post instead of the source data directly, then this change should be reactive. Let's try that. Now, once I submit the post, we immediately get the new post in the browser. Isn't that awesome? It bugs me though that the input doesn't clear itself after the post is submitted. I will fix that by setting our new post text data to an empty string after the post is pushed to the source data. This is a common thing you will find yourself doing when working with forms in front-end applications. Back in the browser now, our input gets cleared after each submission. Great!